So you'll notice that I have that linked image in the document of the cosmos. And you'll notice that when you select the image, you get certain features to appear in the control panel. So you'll notice that when I select the image, the control bar says that we are focusing on a linked image. And it tells me the image name, it says it's in RGB, and it says the current DPI or PPI setting for it. You'll notice that the very first button that I have there says embed. So once you select an image and you see the information in the control bar, you can embed. You'll notice that there's an option that says edit original. If I click on the edit original button, what it will do is it will launch it in what the software thinks is the native software. Now, because I downloaded this image off the internet, it thinks that the native software is Preview on a Mac. On a PC, it's going to use whatever the native imaging software is there. It's not going to launch it in Photoshop. Now, you'll notice that the third option, what does it say right there? Image trace. Okay, and next to image trace, you'll notice that there's a drop-down menu with a bunch of different terms next to it. So image trace is actually a panel. So if I go to the window menu, you'll notice that there is a image trace feature. Now, depending on the version of Illustrator that you're using, this panel may be called something else. In some versions of Illustrator, it's just called trace. In this particular version, it's called image trace, okay? You'll notice that the preset that we're in says default, and there's a trace button. So basically, I select the image, and then I hit the trace button, and it will activate the trace feature. So I'm going to go ahead and just select trace, and let's see what happens. So you'll notice it's running a little process, and then it does this. Let's look at the image in our layers panel. So you'll notice that in our layers panel, the image is now referred to as a tracing object. This is a tracing object. So just like Live Paint, this is a hybrid. It's not a vector, but it's not the original image either. It's something in between. It's an effect that's been applied to this. Okay, so just like other effects, I can release this into vectors. And I can release this into vectors by using one of two features. Do you remember what the two features are called? For turning an effect into a vector, to have the software redraw it as a vector. Let's remember what it's called. Right there, expand. So expanding will release effects into vectors. Okay, now I want to share with you all that there is another feature similar to expand called flatten transparency. Flatten transparency. This is the advanced expanding feature. So if you get a question on your quiz that says, what tool do you use to convert effects into vectors? What are the two possibilities? Flatten transparency and expanding. Okay? So image trace gives me the ability to process this with different settings. Currently, we're in the default setting. So when I click on the default area, you'll notice that there's about 10 or so different options that I can activate. Here's one called technical drawing. Now, certain images just don't work very well. A technical drawing would work well with a blueprint. This is not a blueprint, so it doesn't know how to render that information. This algorithm doesn't work with it. If I go to line art, this is what it's going to look like. So see, sometimes it takes a little bit of time to process it. It doesn't look much better. All right, let's go to sketched art. It's starting to look like something. It has sort of a, what's called a reductive drawing quality to it, or something like a logo or a silhouette. Here's black and white logo. Doesn't really look very different than that. All right, let's go to shades of gray. All right, and you'll notice that it's taking a little bit longer. You'll notice that it redrew it with greater accuracy, but clearly the color is missing. And I can go to color rendering. So here's one for 3 colors. So this is going to start looking like a silk screen, sort of like an Andy Warhol. All right. All right, so 3 colors, pretty nice. You'll notice that you have the ability to modify any of these settings. So currently, this is the number of colors that it's using. You can increase this and say, I want 5 colors, and the software will add 2 more to it. All right. And then I can go back to my presets. Here's 16 colors. Still looks pretty good. Let's go to low fidelity photo, and then we'll go to high fidelity photo. I want you to see how the image is processed. So this still has an illustrative quality to it. It looks like it's been affected somehow. I don't think it looks very soulful. It doesn't look like an artist drew this. It looks like a computer generated it. So that's one of the problems that I have with this particular setting. Let's go to high fidelity photo. So depending on the quality of the image that you choose and you're working with, some of these settings will be better suited for it. If it's a really low resolution image, it may not process very well, but this one's pretty high and it has a lot of accuracy. You'll notice that when the software redraws it, it still looks pretty nice, right? So this is the software processing the image as a potential vector. It's not a vector until I hit expand. That's why I'm calling it a potential vector. Now, right here, this little eye icon will toggle the vector versus the original. So there's the original, there's the vector. There's the original, there's the vector. Is there a big difference? No, not really. It's a pretty good representation of the image. And then you'll notice where it says view, there are different options that I can activate. I could say, you know what, I want to see the outlines. So this is what Illustrator is going to give me in terms of paths and outlines for the content. If I go here, you'll notice that it shows me the outlines with the source image. So there's different ways to preview the information. So to recap, I placed an image, I selected it, I activated the image trace option. When I did that, it turned my image into a tracing object, and I chose a preset called High Fidelity Photo, and it gave me this. And now that I'm happy with this, I can expand this to release it to vectors, which I'm about to do. I'm going to expand it to release it to vectors. All right, so these are the vectors, and you'll notice that when I hit expand, it released to a group, and these are all of the tiny little vectors that made up the finished illustration. So let me hit Command Y so you can see all of the paths. Okay, so I have a question for you. It did a really nice job redrawing this as a vector. But once again, it looks just like a photograph. It doesn't really look like an illustration. It just took the image and broke it into vectors. Do you think it's easy to modify and change this image? If I wanted to change the color of the flower, do you think that's easy here in Illustrator? Well, I'd have to select all of these little paths that make up the pink portions. So I know I can do it, but it's not very efficient. It's going to be difficult to grab all of those tiny little vectors. So this feature, while it's really lovely, is sort of a once you apply it, you're not going to change it type feature. Kind of like embedding an image. When I embed the image, I can't really change it anymore. When I trace it, I can't really change it anymore. It's too difficult to manage it. So once again, it's a great feature. When would I use this? When would this feature apply to what I do in this software? So I'm going to tell a little story, and hopefully this will provide a context for this. So first of all, I want to ask you, a vector, what's one of the benefits of a vector? Starts with an S. It's scalable. It's scalable. So meaning that it can be the size of a postage stamp, and I can scale it the size of the side of a building, and it's going to maintain the integrity of the image. So let's say, hypothetically speaking, the Cosmo image was an image that was given to me to produce a postcard. And it was for a nursery that just opened up down the street. And they wanted to create a mailer to send out to all of the people in the neighborhoods around the new nursery. And it's just a little advertisement. Hey, we're here now. Come and check out our shop. 10% off, blah, 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 right? So I make this postcard, and it's a very successful campaign. And so the company that I'm working for, the nursery, says, we want to do a billboard. We want to make a billboard on El Camino, a little bit further down the road, maybe in around the San Jose, Santa Clara area, off the Alameda, something like that. And the billboard is 20 feet across by 15 feet tall. But they gave me a little 5x7 photograph. And I go to the client, I said, well, I can't use this 5x7 photograph and scale it the size of a billboard. Can you give me another photo? That's the only one we have. I don't have a better camera, or that's the one that we bought from the stock house, or that's the picture my daughter took and we really love it, and that's the only one we have. Please use that picture. There's a lot of circumstances like that come up where they're really married to this photo or image. And so here's a feature that would allow me to turn it into a vector that has a relatively high level of accuracy, where I can produce an image that I can scale. I can take that 5x7, I can have Illustrator process it. Now that it's a vector, that I've expanded it, I can scale it to that 15x20 size and not have any loss. It's going to look pretty good. But remember, I can't really edit it all that much. So that would be a scenario in which this trace feature might work. I'm going to show you one more example.